Welcome to the lens test of the Canon J20ax8B f1.7. This is captured on an FS7 Mark I with Super 16 and Super 35 modes. Test 1. General image quality using an optical corrector in Super 16 mode. So Super 16 mode, no doubler, optical corrector with a 1.1 times optical corrector that corrects for spherical aberrations that would be present. It corrects for not having a prism in the camera. And we get some veiling flare wide open on the telly end, but as we zoom out, the veiling flare cleans up a bit. Image quality looks very similar to the other Canon SD lenses, despite this being an older version of the Canon SD lenses. Image quality is still on par with them. The zoom, however, is a bit noisier and ever so slightly slower. We also have a worse minimum focusing distance, and we can't focus on the pot plant as it's too close. So the newer SD lenses obviously have a better minimum focusing distance and be able to focus closer. But we tested it, we got it in focus with the macro mode. And wide open, that's sharp enough. Quite a good performance, so it's such an old lens. So engaging the doubler now, wide open, and still decent image quality. Not too bad overall. Doubler off and dropping down to f2.8. Still veiling flare at 2.8. Good sharpness. Veiling flare cleans up as you zoom out. Good detailing, and still can't get the pot because of the minimum focusing distance, but we'll go a macro switch there, and good sharpness. For an older lens, this is performing quite well. The optical corrector obviously helps a fair bit. And quite quite good, considering this is a challenging lighting situation, shooting into a window and a light that's facing the lens. Dropping down to f4, and we get some great contrast as we zoom out to clean up the veiling flare. Very good, and we'll throw the macro in again for the plant pot, and it's sharp there. And f4 is looking good. Throwing the doubler in to see the image quality at f4, and still got good image quality at f4, and you get even closer because we are Super 16, so we can use it for extra magnification. Dropping filter and going down to f8. Veiling flare is greatly reduced at f8, and image quality is very, very good at f8 as expected. All these lenses seem to clean up very well at f8, if not sooner. Go macro mode, and that's pretty sharp there. Great performance for such an older SD lens. Throwing in the doubler at f8, we lose a little bit of contrast and get a bit of veiling flare back, as is typical when using the doubler, but still relatively good. So this is the 20 by Canon 20x8 f1.7. Test 2, general image quality with an optical corrector, Super 35 mode this time. So we're capturing Super 35 4K. This is without the doubler, and we will use the doubler to get full coverage. So this is with an optical corrector, so we are 2.1 times magnification, or 2.2 times magnification to get full coverage. And you can see we get a little bit of vignetting as we go in for full zoom, but you could crop that out, being that we are in a 4K recording mode and still have a larger than 1080p image. So as with all the other tests, when using the doubler, we get some veiling flare when lights are pinging the lens. and obviously the minimum focusing distance of this lens doesn't allow us to focus on the pot plant, as it's within the minimum focusing distance just. Overall, besides the added vignetting, good performance wide open. Dropping down to 2.8, and still got veiling flare. This one's a bit uglier veiling flare than the others. It's particularly spotty compared to just a wash over the whole image. This one spots. So that's good image quality there at 2.8. And dropping to f4. And we still have that very spotty veiling flare, but as we zoom out it clears up, as it has been. And once we zoom out we get good contrast again. But the veiling flare sort of pops in and out through the last 50% of the zoom range, depending on how the light hits the lens. Dropping down to f8. Still got veiling flare at f8. It cleans up as expected, and sharpness is great at f8. And that's that one. Test 3, Vignetting and coverage, Super 35 capture, this starting with an optical correcting adapter. So here we have with no doubler, using a 1.1 times optical adapter. And this is no doubler, and then engaging the doubler, we get almost good coverage on Super 35, but because we're recording in 4K, you could crop in post to use a larger than 1080p image size. Test 3 part 2, Vignetting and coverage. This is with a basic pass-through adapter this time. So no optical adapter. So this is with the doubler in. And that's with the doubler off. And so you can notice the image circle is slightly smaller as we don't have the optical corrector. putting the doubler in, you could crop in and still have a higher than 1080p image by cropping out the corners that are vignetted when using the doubler. Test 4, Budget Adapter Image Quality Test. This is with a basic pass-through adapter, starting in Super 35 capture. So this is the Canon 20x8 older SD lens. So this is no doubler and no optical adapter, Super 35 4K. And then we can put the doubler in and we nearly get full coverage, and you could crop to get a larger than 1080p image. This is wide open, and we get lots of veiling flare and some spherical aberration there. Get some veiling flare because of the doubler, and the spherical aberration because we're not using a correcting optic. Definitely a lack of contrast compared to when using an optical adapter, and the veiling flare sticks around for longer as you're zooming out. A little bit milky, and that's the widest field of view. This lens actually performs quite well with a corrector compared to this. And going down to f2.8, a little less milkiness, a bit more sharpness. Not too amazing just yet. But in a pinch, you might be able to get away with f4. f2.8. Dropping down to f4, and definite improvement in sharpness at f4, and still lots of veiling flare, and it still hangs around longer than when you're not using an optical adapter, and good sharpness at f4, the doubler when not using an optical adapter. The doubler does help correct the image slightly compared to not using a doubler and not using an optical corrector. Onto f8. Good sharpness, and still got some haziness there and veiling flare, but overall better sharpness. With the optical adapter, all these lenses sharpen up and have reduced veiling flare and better contrast considerably compared to their non-optical corrected uses. Test 5 Part 2, basic pass-through adapter, image quality, Super 16 mode this time. So this is the worst case scenario. This lens is correctly back focused and focused on the objects. We're not using any optical adapter and not using the doubler. The image quality is very milky and aberrated and quite unusable wide open. You can sacrifice the wide field of view of the lens by using the doubler, which corrects some of the imperfections in the lens, but then the lens becomes a much more telephoto lens, as you can see there. That's the wider field of view with the doubler. It does some level of correction. You still have some spherical aberrations there, but you can see it's much less gauzy and milky compared to without. But using an optical correcting adapter would be the preferred situation here, as it would remove the milkiness and haziness while still retaining the wide field of view of the lens. dropping down to 2.8. Minor improvement in everything at 2.8, but still not quite usable. This is a particularly hard lens test for lenses, as it's looking into a window and into a panel light. At f4 we got good sharpness, less haziness, and overall a much better image at f4. Definitely cleans up at f4 and becomes usable at f4 for some situations. The optical adapter still raises image quality considerably for wide open f-stops lower than f4. Getting good sharpness with the doubler at f4, and we have even more reach with the doubler because we're in Super 16. We can use the doubler for magnification rather than sensor coverage. So doubler off, dropping down to f8, dropping filter and ISO, and good sharpness at f8 as you'd expect. And that ends that test for the Canon J20. Next, test 6, minimum focusing and macro test with an optical correcting adapter, Super 16 mode first. So this is the Canon J20 in Super 16 using an optical correcting adapter of 1.1 times. This is the minimum focusing distance of the lens. We're zoomed in here. So the minimum focusing distance marked on the lens is 0.9 meters. So that's a bit further than the newer SD21 by Canon by 0.1 meters. But the actual distance that we were able to get minimum focus at was 1.2 meters, which is the longest out of the bunch. The adapting B4 lenses to cameras across the board seems to add approximately 200 mil or 0.2 meters to the minimum focusing distance, but this one actually added 0.3 meters to the minimum focusing distance, potentially because it's an older model lens. Dropping down to f8 and get excellent image quality f8. So this lens has macro mode, specifically when not using the doubler. So we can get really close to the macro and get basically touching the lens hood there. So it works well in macro mode. A thing to note is that when you put the doubler in, if you're using it for coverage of the sensor, the macro mode switch does not work on the lens. The doubler must lock the macro switch from being able to activate when the doubler is activated. So without the doubler, we have macro option, and it works well. Test 7, minimum focusing and macro, part 2, optical corrective adapter, Super 35 capture this time. So because we're capturing in Super 35, we're using the doubler to get coverage of the full sensor. And this is the same minimum focusing distance as the previous test. So marked on the lens is 0.9 meters. But the actual distance that you have to be away is 1.2 meters. And that's the image quality wide open in Super 35. And dropping down to f8 now. And that's the image quality f8. Excellent image quality as you expect. Always best to stop down when going for close focus. This lens is unable to go into macro mode when used in Super 35 because we are using the doubler to get coverage of the Super 35 sensor. And when the doubler is engaged, the macro switch cannot be engaged on this older lens. Newer lenses, you can still engage the macro switch. But this older lens locks the macro switch when the doubler is engaged. So no macro test for the Super 35 mode on this lens. The minimum focusing tests and macro test both have the same distance results with and without optical adapters, just worse image quality when not using optical adapter. See the image quality tests of the pass-through adapter tests, as they will give an indication of the image quality you can expect. Thanks for watching, and if you need any more details or have a question, drop a comment down below and I'll answer any questions you have.